Okay, greetings, brothers and sisters. Few things to get to here. Just brief introduction. Um, I just completed the 277th edition of the Journey series and then editing the 278th, and that's always interesting. And um, I was talking about my health stuff, and I just wrote a letter, like a PDF. I turned it into a PDF in response to this. They have like a caseworker that's in charge of your, you know, whatever. And it'll be interesting to see how they respond because trust, and I read the letter, but it's there's too much personal stuff in there for other people, like I mentioned the guy's name. I'd have to whatever. I might read it at some point if I if they react badly, and I'll edit out the names and other stuff. But I looked at ChatGTP about the thing, just as a different perspective here, and see if I can find my photos. And so I asked ChatGTP, percussion-based chiropractic tools like the Pro Adjuster create rapid mechanical vibrations that can transmit force through the chest. Using them directly over or near the heart can potentially disturb heart rhythm, stress implant devices like pacemakers, or cause injury to sensitive cardiovascular tissue. For safety, they're typically kept away from the heart area. Um, so but the guy didn't ask me about it ahead of time, which I realized, and so it's kind of fucked up. And I'm like, this is just already too stressful. When somebody else fucks up, and then you have to deal with the stress or whatever, and their reaction, or whether they'll be able to take responsibility, right? Because they fucked up. But anyways, why I wanted to do this introduction more than any other reason, I got a comment. I didn't take a photo of it, but I'm going to go back and read it because I'm going to do it. So I'm going to start with the Tucker Carlson thing about the fake assassination attempt, and he's got some bullshit guy on there. They're talking bullshit, stuff. Um, Got to find this thing, and there's a comment here. I think I went past it. No, here it is. So somebody commented, and I didn't think much of it, but then I realized it's kind of interesting. This person's talking about Jimmy Dore, because I was talking about what a piece of shit he is. And it says, Jimmy says in the interview that God is within us, that we don't need church, etc., that our journey with God is our own, almost saying we got to evolve out of our religion. I thought this was interesting, almost like he's been watching Pockets of the Future. This has happened quite a bit. And I don't know or I don't care whether these people watch me or not. But if you are watching Jimmy, go fuck yourself, right? Fucking parasite, you thief. If he's taking stuff, like, and I don't mind people taking the ideas because they're not, I mean, whatever these ideas that are here, they're there for everyone. They're ideas that, I mean, certainly a lot of the stuff I present here is teachings of the Sajmark system or channeled information coming from God. The problem I have with it is when people take this information and warp it and manipulate it to fit their agenda, right? And they don't tell people the source that it came from so that people, when they hear it, would come to hear and benefit from those types of things because that's what you should do. And if you're not doing that, you're a worthless piece of shit, right? Because, I mean, I always credit, the source of all my information, other than like people like my brother and other people who, you pick up personality traits and, people have sort of a presentation. My brother was an AM radio guy and he had influence on me. And, there's people over the years that I've incorporated into my personality, like you see things and, people copy other people just without really realizing it or whatever it is, right? But in terms of all that kind of stuff that's just done unconsciously, people in your life, your dad, your family, your mom, you start to integrate all the people that you meet into your personality, into your internal worlds, right? And they have influence over you. Just things you see on TV or whatever. But then there's like information. And, I've been around for a long time in the truth community, and there are a lot of things that people start saying they're similar, and maybe they came up with it on their own, which is great. But if they haven't, they should steer people the right way. Because Jimmy Dore doesn't know shit about divinity within us, right? He's not a spiritual practitioner. And so maybe I should find that. I'll go find that in the interview. Um, Whatever. And like it's good. I like hearing that. Like I like people saying that, because it's the right way to go. But if you're using it as a way, to steer people towards your fucking merch or your bullshit ideas, right? Things like that. Because that's what's happened over and over again. People twist things and they use it for their own selfish needs. And so that was, there's a few other comments I want to get to here. And so here is, I think I did these other ones. Okay, yeah, I did. It's always good when I pull these up ahead of time, but I still then got to go find them. So here's the one I really wanted to address. So this is to a video entitled, "Look, Grandma is twerking and Grandpa is groping, Charlie Shekels revisited." You've got a grave misunderstanding of Exodus if you think God was being a jealous little bitch in the Old Testament. The person put it in quotes, being a jealous little bitch. That made my day. This is, I didn't really want to ban this person, but, I needed to. Moses directly disobeyed direct orders from God, and there's a direct result of that. Moses threw the dart in the air, and the dart landed on his leg. I made that reference to my brother. He had a friend who did that when he was a kid. Did you miss the part where God came down, personally bury Moses? He logically would have done that if he was just a jealous little bitch, high on overkill punishment. Okay, so when the person says you've got a grave misunderstanding, like, what do you mean grave? Like it's almost like threatening, like I'm, whatever. It isn't God. When I said the God of the Old Testament is a jealous little bitch, it's because it's not God. That isn't fucking God. So in what way did God write the Old Testament? How did he write the Old Testament? Did he personally come down from heaven and write the Old Testament? Where do these stories come from? Is God the narrator of the Old Testament? Is this the word of God? This is God's story? So this passed through fucking people. Dumb fucking people, many of them corrupt and evil and manipulative, and there's a lot of the stories they took from other traditions. They didn't come up with the idea. You think some Jewish guy thought up the idea of a soul? It was discovered in India. The idea of a soul came from India hundreds of thousands of years ago. Now, you can believe that or not, right? You could say, like, how could I know that? Well, how could you know any of the stuff you think you know, right? But the religious tradition, the spiritual tradition in India far exceeds anything else in the world. And they have lots more information about the soul, which is called Atman, which is from Sanskrit, which is an ancient, an ancient spiritual dialect, which really isn't used anymore. But it is, Atman is a beautiful word. All the Sanskrit words, like the ones that I know, yatra of the soul, journey of the soul, they're wonderful words, right? And so you should ask the question, how is this God? Like, what do you mean, God? In what way is it, this is, like, how is this being confirmed this is God? Like, who is the author of the Old Testament? Where did all these books come from? All the things that they put in there. These are supposed to be events, and it happened, somewhere between 3,000 and 5,000 years ago. So this is years and years before Christ was born. 3,000 years might have happened before Christ was born of biblical history. And, there's like 80 or 100 or 200,000 years of Hindu literature and all these things that are even more ancient than that. And so, none of those things, people had a different way, were constructed differently. Physically, think about the effects of modern life on people and just, modern medicine and, chemicals in the food and non-organic foods and, air conditioning and vehicles and all kinds of things. People have changed and morphed and mutated to adapt to their environment. And our language, I've talked about this, our language is quite different. And so, like, you never ask the question, why is this God? How do I know this is God? When somebody describes God as a person, God is in essence, and we're supposed to, get closer to our understanding of God, but we can never know God. But God isn't a king that came down with a fucking shovel and buried Moses. You got to be retarded and indoctrinated to believe that shit. Like, so, don't talk to me like I'm fucking missing out, right? Like you're getting something superior here. And I don't think what I say here is, fucking genius. I mean, some of the teachings of the Sajmarg system are amazing teachings and groundbreaking and new. But when I talk about this stuff, it's the same kind of stuff I say about celebrities or all this other bullshit. You've been bullshitted, motherfucker, right? You've been fucking lied to. You've got a grave misunderstanding of Exodus. You think Jesus was being a little jealous little bitch in the Old Testament. The creation, they created a God and they called God, this is our God. And they wrote a book about a fictional God, like a God in a video game or a God in a movie. And they gave the God, various attributes. And one of those was jealousy. God is jealous in the Old Testament. He's quite jealous, right? In fact, if you go search the Bible Hub of God being jealous, here you go, you fucking dipshit. This is the most prominent Bible verse. This trait, I said Bible verse of God being jealous is Exodus 34:14, which states, "Do not worship any other god, for the Lord, whose name is jealous, is a jealous God." His name is fucking jealous. He's a jealous little bitch in the Exodus that you're talking about. So there's that. Bible names God as jealous in several other key passages, primarily when addressing idolatry and covenant faithfulness. Exodus 25, "You shall not bow down to them or serve them, for I, Lord, am a jealous God." A jealous little bitch. God doesn't get jealous. Why would God ever be jealous? It's in your fucking Exodus book, you moron. Deuteronomy. Again, you don't have to be here. Like I don't make content for dumb fucks who believe that the Bible is like fucking the Word of God. I don't. It's not, and I don't mind that people believe that. I mean, I want to hear about it. It bugs me now, I guess, now they know how much weird shit is in there. But people who think that this is the Word of God, it's not the Word of God. Human beings created the Old and New Testament. Jesus didn't even write his own book, and if he did write his own book, it still wouldn't be the Word of God, because Jesus was just a saint, and he was still evolving, and he's still evolving now. Deuteronomy 6:15, Deuteronomy 4:24, "For the Lord your God is consuming fire of jealous God." Deuteronomy 6:15, "For your Lord God is in the midst is a jealous God." Joshua 24:19, "He is a holy God, his jealous God. He will not forgive your transgression of your sins." Nahum 1:2, "The Lord is a jealous and avenging God. The Lord is avenging and wrathful." And there isn't anything here from the New Testament, right? And so, again, God isn't jealous. God is just love. God has one overwhelming emotion. God doesn't have a mind. He isn't a person. He doesn't have an ego. He can't bury anybody, right? There's none of that shit. And they just, they bullshitted you. Whoever wrote, these various passages, and it's all over the place because there's more than one person who wrote all this stuff down. And these are stories that are passed down for thousands of years, hundreds of years, between stories stolen from other traditions. And the idea of a soul was stolen from ancient Indian. I don't want to say stolen, but they're not crediting the fact that they didn't figure out that there was a soul, because that happened years and years before that, and not in that place. It's not a very spiritual place. It's not a holy land. None of these things they say about it are not true. And so, you've been bullshitted. Like, I'm telling you the truth, and people should be like, "Oh, I'm glad you told me that." But instead, they come up with these bullshit things. So that was the one I wanted to get to. And then one wrote 24:14, 24 minutes and 18 seconds. "God commands, thou shalt not be cunty, LOL." And somebody was responding to me saying that. And I dare say that's, if we have one commandment in Pockets of the Future, "Thou shalt not be cunty" is the number one fucking command. Hopefully I'll remember and put that in the title of the video, but we'll see. All right, so let's get into the other stuff here. Tucker Carlson's got a weird fucking area here. Anyhow, the title of this video, "The Attempts on Trump's Life, Why He Shut It Down." And I knew it's going to be some bullshit thing here. I haven't watched it yet.
This is the question of Trump and his, he was the target of the assassination attempt, which you have said, and I agree with you, was real. Like someone tried to
So it's real. It's fucking totally real. You said it, and I agree. It's totally fucking fake. It's fake as fuck. It was WWE style. And he doesn't want it investigated because it's fake as fuck. He's like talking about it because it's fake as fuck. Because otherwise, that was his signature moment where he got up and said, fight, fight, fight. He got up, and they've used that on merch, and they've tried to make that a big thing. And this gay-ass fucking maxi pad he was wearing over a cut that didn't exist. A cunt that didn't exist.
Kill him, missed. Killed somebody else. But if the president wanted this investigation to continue, it would continue, correct?
Presumably, yeah. Maybe in his first administration, you could argue that he didn't have total control over the deep state or whatever. But now, yeah, he's got
total control over the deep state. I don't need to listen to this bullshit, because you guys know it's the fact that they think it's real or saying it's real. It's just, that speaks for itself. I'm going to look into the Jimmy Dore tomorrow when I have him saying God within. I mean, I'll find it today and I'll start talking about it tomorrow. I'm pretty fried now and I just want to wrap this thing up for today, and then I'll come back tomorrow and start making this video. I have a video going up tomorrow morning, and I'll start making this video for 2 o'clock on Thursday. Okay. I think I found the part where Jimmy Dore's talking about God within. I don't think he's saying that exactly. They're talking about Carl Jung versus Sigmund Freud.
And Jung figured that out, that we have a collective unconscious, meaning there's only one consciousness.
Okay, so I studied all this stuff, right? The one good thing, I went to I have a master's in counseling, and but I was already doing the meditation, so I'd gone through counseling myself, and I had studied psychology in school in like undergraduate. I had 3 attempts at college, and I got a master's degree from a transpersonal New Age college in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And the one good thing about the college is it was experiential, and it presented all the models of psychology and these various counseling models, right? There's behaviorism, there's psychodynamic, which is the Freud model. There's Jungianism, Jungian psychology, and there's all these things. Gestalt, there's too many to list, and they're quite different from each other. Like behaviorism, behaviorism is like Pavlov's dog, those things, and Jung was a little bit on the spiritual side, but very not. This idea that these people have, white people, like Tucker Carlson and this piece of shit. White people are very successful at material life. White people dominate the monetary system. They're good at war. They're good at, and people of color, many of them are better at spirituality. And they're more fatalistic. They have more, natural faith. They're more passive. I mean, depending on the group of people. But, Western people, mostly white people and Americans, American culture, European culture. And you could be a person of color that goes to America and, Europe, and then you become more centered on money and materialism. Whereas if you go to these Eastern countries, you become more focused on the spiritual, right? But white people have this idea because they're dominant in terms of the physical, material world and economic world, that they're also better at spirituality, that God has blessed them. And it's not true. Like people, and also we're active. We're can do. People who are white people are more active and more, have a will force and don't believe in destiny as much. We make our own destiny. Where people who are born in these other cultures, and again, it's a generalization, but it's a cultural thing, and it's also probably there's some roots in genetics, more passive, and they're better at fatalistic can be a way to describe it that's not as good. These kind of thing, fatalism where you just well, my fate, my destiny, God, all these things, and so Jung tapped into some of these things, just like every other piece of shit white person that reads some Eastern literature and then tries to monetize it into some New Age bullshit thing, right? And so Jung was not great. Like, I didn't know anybody, any counselor, any therapist who practiced Jungian counseling. It doesn't even exist. So he's saying this thing like he discovered something, like, he had a theory, right?
spiritual.
Literally, in a way that's spooky. I mean,
Spooky.
It's shocking.
And Jung figured that out, that we have a collective unconscious, meaning there's only
You've read some book on Jung and then you're talking about it like Jung did something, just like I was saying about the Bible, like in the beginning. Just because somebody said it and they say God said it doesn't mean it's true. Like, it's a theory. The collective unconscious, you can say that there's, like, I kind of remember what that's about. That's everybody's, an egregore is the word that we use in Sajmarg. And so there's some truth to this, but like Jung wasn't some brilliant, these guys were pricks. I mean, they were contemporaries, Jung and Freud. And Freud, he developed this idea that the Oedipus complex, that every kid wanted to kill his father and marry his mother. And fucking many of us, that's not true. Like most of us, that is not something we wanted to do. And then because of that, he then had these young women who were being sexually abused by guys who were powerful people in the government, powerful people in, they were rich and famous, they're rich and powerful people in Austria. And so instead of acknowledging their abuse, Freud decided to make up this thing called the Electra complex, that these girls wanted to kill their mother and marry their fathers. And so this was all made up bullshit because he didn't want to, the truth of what these girls were saying, he didn't want to help these girls because he was a piece of shit. Like Freudianism and Jungianism are just, they're not good. Jungianism is different, but they're still like, it's very remedial stuff and a lot of it's kind of demonic and wrong.
only one consciousness, right? So there's not your consciousness and then the God conscious. There's just one consciousness and we're a part of it. And the fact that you think you're separate from it is a mistake. And so we're part.
See, a lot of what Jung took was from like Indian philosophy, which is what a lot of these New Age people do. And then this clown's like just parroting what he says, right? Like, but has no real practical knowledge, right? Just like he has no practical knowledge of the truther stuff. He found a little niche, he was an ex-comedian, the Republican Party is like, it's like there's not that many celebrities in it. He comes in, he parasites off of what we did, what we created here and what people created, like my brother's generation, sincere average people, people who aren't famous and that produce like good content. And then these grifters come in, they all do it. And they, I mean, like what the fuck is he talking about? Like he's just mirroring something that's Jung said that he took from Indian philosophy and Indian, Hindu religion and things like this.
Part of it. And as we evolve our consciousness, we evolve the world's consciousness, right? Because we all share a collective unconscious. And one of the ways he figured it out was that he would have dreams and there would be symbols in his dreams. And he didn't know what they meant, but he could tell that they were meaningful. And then he was reading about the alchemists. Now, everybody thought the alchemists were trying to turn lead into gold, but what they
fucking going with this, bro?
They were really trying to do was turn psychological lead into gold, and they had to do it, hide it from the church. And so they had figured out what some of these symbols meant, and he saw them write about the symbols that he was seeing in his own dreams, and he was like, "Oh my God, I'd never read this before. How would I know about this symbol to show up in my?"
Because of past lives, right? It can be explained through past lives and also through, the fact that you have a spiritual side that is like has infinite potential. There's all kinds of ways that people can communicate through, and people have the ability for telekinesis. It's just not operative. Like these things can all be done, and certainly being channeling higher developed souls or lower developed souls. Those things have been, people are, to have developed those skills, like all these things, right? And so he's making it sound like it can only be, the only explanation is his theory, that there's this collective consciousness, which is, again, there's an individual soul that is a part of the divinity, that has a personality and it forms these subtle bodies to manifest you as an individual person, right? And so when you go back, you are part of the collective, the divine, the divine essence, but there's still some individuality there. It's just not as obvious or as blatant as it is as a human being. But like it's just words. None of this stuff matters if you don't. I'm gonna switch over to a voiceover here.
So that's when he started to figure out that we all share a consciousness.
Yes.
That there is one consciousness. There's the one. And so it's pretty
You
heavy.
get glimpses of that, I think, occasionally. People in the course of daily life get just a flash that somehow there's a connection between all peoples.
There's only, it's like we're hairs on the human head thinking we're separate, right? You're all part of the same head. You're all part of the same body. We're all part of the same consciousness. There's only one. And so.
Is that why you hate Erika Kirk? All right. Let me switch over to voiceover. I used to feel like if somebody was, whoever it was just like seemed to be moving forward from the truther world or the celebrity world or the, even someone like Donald Trump who flirted with the truth community and was entertaining some of these ideas and with RFK Jr., who was one of the best people to articulate some of the truther things, that was like a legitimate person in terms of the show and, was a part of the, the club or whatever it is. And I used to think that it was, good enough for them to just be right about a few things or, even if they were shilling and faking it, it was okay. Like it was a move in the right direction, but like, as I thought about it, it became more important that whatever the person represented as an information source, as a person other people listen to, that there was a pathway to the right path, right, to a spiritual path, a practical one, right? Because words are just words. Like you go to every religious tradition, every spiritual, whatever it is, New Age things, ancient rituals, whatever it is, what people believed. And a lot of the stuff is very similar. When there's an acknowledgement of a soul, and then they have these teachings, and the words are good, and I guess to raise people's consciousness who are dumb fucks who, don't have the ability for abstract thought. I mean, they're limited based in their, their genetic brain makeup and lack of protein as a young person, lack of brain development. They don't have the ability for abstract thought. There's lots of people who they just really can't think of God other than like God as an animal or a person or a thing or a stone statue. It has to be rooted. God has to be rooted in materialism. They can't think of like a soul, an invisible soul, and they just and that's gone on forever. The majority of people just don't understand that shit, and it's tough titty for them. Like apparently, what I said is I remembered the 11th commandment is don't be cunty. And so that person commented. I forgot what I had said, but which makes me happy repeating it and thinking about it again. But there has to be a practical approach at the end of the rainbow, right? All these divergent truther paths have to be leading somewhere, to a solution. And none of these motherfuckers have it, right? It's not my solution, this idea of divinity within and the Sajmark practice that I do. I've meditated for like 24,000 hours. It's crazy. Like, I was like, that's just fucking crazy. But, it's mounted up over the years. And so, like 2 hours a day for 30 some years or whatever. And so, not that, and if how much was I meditating correctly? How much was I thinking about God? Like it becomes a, like, you bat 300, which is a lot of, hitting 300. I mean, there's only been one guy, I think, Ted Williams, who hit 400, right? 4 out of 10 times he got up, he got a hit. But six out of 10 times he didn't. There's percentages. And so, how well are you doing something? How efficient are you? How, people can meditate on different levels, but whatever it is, I've been engaged in a spiritual practice for a number of years. And, as much as a slacker I am and all the things, that, my various limitations or character flaws. You learn things and you develop things and you become something when you engage with something like that. A legitimate practice. And, all the people that crapped out because of Dodgy and the piece of shit he was and all the things that I've seen, and a lot of it's depressing, and the idea that all these saints went to high levels or higher levels than the average person, and then they had a spiritual fall. Their ego took over, some hidden some scar or something that was, some little power-hungry part of themselves or whatever it might be. And so, a lot of in terms of the spiritual practice and evolution on a practical level, like actually engaging in something that leads you to form a relationship with the divinity within you. And it doesn't take much effort because God's there and God wants you to connect. So there's already half the battle's already won because God is willing, right? But are you willing? Like Master Chargy talked about how he saw an old American movie where there's a guy named Barkus, and Barkus wanted to let his girlfriend know that he was wanting to marry her, so he put up a big banner that said Barkus is willing. And Chargy joked, but is the woman willing, right? Barkus may be willing, but what about the bitch, right? What about the woman? So, and Barkus is cunty. It's getting late here. I just got to wrap this thing up. But anyhow, you have to have a practice. So all these people that are just talking about truth or things, and it's not for me to. I don't care. I'm not there listening to them. I'm not their fans, right? Whatever. But they're like this guy. You can tell this piece of shit. He's just taking, other people's things. And somebody wrote the comment saying that you must listen to me, but that Jungian shit is not coming from me, right? He's read a book on Carl Jung, who is, the collective consciousness is just, an inferior way of talking about how that there's divinity, and within the divine realm, everything's connected. But there is individuality. That's the problem. Because, you can choose to go away from God's path and what God would choose if in your place, right? And you have your own ability to manifest your own internal universe, and that's where demons come from. But anyhow, all these people that are out there, the Tucker Carlsons and these other people, they're more part of the problem because they represent an alternative to the mainstream bullshit, but they're still keeping you going backwards, right? They're still thwarting your progress as a person. I guess what I'm saying here is, with all this truther bullshit and all this religious bullshit and all these people talking, is there an end game? Or is it just going around the hamster wheel blathering about fucking nothing with no real purpose, no real, goal, no practice, no ways to achieve the goal, just talking to show off everything that and look at how much more I know than you, all this kind of stuff that people do. Like, it's just, that's why I don't listen to all this stuff, because it's like, there's nothing at the end of this thing, right? Like, it's just, it's deceptive, because it should be obvious to everyone that the system is going to collapse. And then, there has to be the two things, the system collapsing, which is almost assured, and your death, which is totally assured. Your death is going to happen. And how are you preparing for either one of those things? Hyper-materialism and focused on the material world and material bullshit, and not developing a relationship with your spiritual side, which is, there's practical ways to do that. And these motherfuckers that don't know anything about it shouldn't be talking about it, right? They can, but it's just, it's just, people are just killing time. Nobody really wants to do anything. No one really wants to change. It's just, if I thought about it all the time, I'd be depressed. Because, there should be some kind of, I don't know, you don't need to freak out, but holy shit, we better do something, right? The ship be sinking. And, what are you going to do? Well, we're just going to stand here but just hopefully something will happen, right? Maybe someone will fix it or something. All right. Anyways, let me wrap this one up, and I'll continue on tomorrow. Okay, so it's Wednesday, June 10th. Had a good night's sleep, really good night's sleep. And good meditation this morning. I just wanted to add something to what I was saying. I can't express this enough. There are a lot of just walking corpses that are people who have given up, and, this is whatever the system is propping them up. This might be pretty much everybody to some extent, right? That without the system, these people, most of us couldn't exist, but these people have chosen just to go unconscious, right? They've been given truth or knowledge, and they have every reason and motivation to change. I heard a story yesterday about two people who had cancer, and had parts of their body removed, bragging, or not bragging, talking about eating foods, talking about certain kind of carcinogen fast food stuff. You know, when you know that your body's already been affected by slop, whatever, cancer slop and heart disease slop, and you don't do anything about it. Like when I had that heart thing, I immediately, looked into losing weight and researched, all the things I needed to change to, what I could do on my end to, you just have to fight it. You have to fight the stuff. Like people know when I talk about read the ingredients, which my wife mentioned to me today, it's not just about the stuff in the supermarket. It's about everything, right? That guy who, the chiropractor who used this machine in an inappropriate way, I said, can you let's take a look at see if I have a hiatal hernia. And he adjusted the hernia, and then he just did something else that I didn't sign off on. And I'm like, it caused my erratic heartbeat, right? So, which is good to know about. Like, I feel better about it now that I know what caused it. Like, because it seems so random to come out of nowhere. And then, there's ways that it's been positive that I've changed things and whatever. But you have to, read the situation that you're going through and wonder about what is your part. And so this stuff with Jimmy Dore, Carl Jung is not the solution, right? Jungian psychology. He's read a book at Jung, and he's talking to his audience. There was this idea with the Alex Jones, who's a piece of shit shill, that this is an info war, and if you wake up the dumb fucks, then you could motivate and change the world, right? Change the system. But that's the silliest idea ever, because there's all these people who are walking corpses and they're incapable of change. They have things in their life that are causing them, they're warning signs. Everyone's given a warning sign, right? Like you're making a mistake here. Reverse course. God is there all the time. Divine forces, your soul are telling your ego, yeah, you got to change. Like it happens constantly. You can see it in your life, and you see it in the lives of other people, as you're being told by your circumstances. I mean, when you know things that other people are blocking out purposefully, like you can see it in other people. They've chose to go unconscious about shit they can't deal with. And, when stuff happens to them that is about, hey, you should change. You should do something different. And they're like, nope. They're not even aware of it. So, this idea that waking up the dumb fucks, people who have chosen just to, these are all people who have been chosen for extinction. They're no longer going to be part of planet Earth on a soul level, on a human level, because they're not part of the solution. They're not part of an evolutionary movement to move forward, right? And so, like all these people, these fake truthers and all these people that are out there blathering about, stuff that we were talking about 10, 15 years ago, whatever it is, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Oh, there's the MSNBC now is all in on Epstein. Like Ari Meebler, there was a video I got to check out about, how the Epstein thing's coming back around. I'm like, it's never coming back around, bro. And, I'll take a look at it in a little bit. We will together. The new Epstein evidence and all that stuff. And it's like none of these things are going to change anything. Like what we need to do is change, right? Like everyone should know that people have to fucking change individually and collectively. And the people that have to change the most are the ones who have the most potential to rise up spiritually. So, the only real change, and that comes from somebody who had benefits somewhat from the counseling psychology world. I've studied psychology, and I and I have a master's in counseling, and I started doing counseling on the side for some of the people here. And it just sucked. Like I just, it was just because I needed to. I mean, it was a money thing, and I started to take on clients. And of course, helping is part of it. I thought I would do a good job at it. But it's the same old bullshit because people don't really want to hear the truth about their responsibility and what they need to do. And they don't want to change. Like that's just the whole thing. In a nutshell, it's pretty much everything. So if you think about all the accomplishments, you know, climbing Mount Everest, for example, which is a fucking stupid thing to do. Like this, I mean, it's not even like there's a good view there. You get above a certain level, there's you're above the tree line, which is at like 10,000 feet. There's no more trees, and then everything after that is just mountains and snow and shit. But like that, people think that's an accomplishment, winning a gold medal, right? Whatever, athletically winning a championship, and then being really successful in business and politics, and being a person. They're like, well, that person's successful, and if that's part of your path, then that's part of your path. Having whatever material success, but material success does not translate into spiritual success unless that is part of your. I mean, it's not a part of your your spiritual yatra. Like all the stuff that people strive to do on an egotistical level, that's part of what you do as a person. And if you spend too much of your time and energy trying to be successful in the material world, then you don't focus any part on your spiritual evolution, which is your true success, because your soul has a purpose, and it isn't to accumulate, successful things, awards and, trophies and statues like Trump and all that shit. Like that means absolutely nothing. Having popularity, having recognition, name recognition, being famous, having people recognize you. That it's all. I've always quoted Master Charji, who said that people have to understand that the lowest part of the higher, which is spirituality, is always higher than the highest part of the lower. So the most successful person on earth is on a lower level than a homeless person who is working on their spiritual journey, right? Like, so a crazy person who's working on their, crazy unsuccessful person who's miserable and, failure on every level as a human being, as a person, but as a spiritual person, they are moving forward on their journey, which is, it's possible for that to happen. And so there are people who are capable of understanding God, or at least having the idea of God, an abstract God, mentally. And then on a heart level, they have the kind of heart that can feel God's love. People that come and do the Sajmark meditation, and, it's not a great, I mean, what I do with Gratefulness here is, the people who can feel it, that's, I don't want to say it's extraordinary, but it's under more difficult circumstances than going to meet a preceptor at the preceptor's house and getting sittings, and going to meet the master of the system and be around people in a gathering setting where the energy is a lot easier to feel. It's more powerful. It's more, it's just, it's, you're much more closer to the source. And even though the source is not on a material level, it's, the whole thing. And so, but the people who do it on Gratefulness meditation and can feel the transmission, it's a rare person. I don't know what the percentage of people who can feel the transmission is, like who are sensitive to it, even on a small level, to where they can feel. There's lots of people who can't feel love. They use the word love, but they haven't never felt it or experienced it in their life. They can't feel it, and their heart is just closed up, and these things. So there's lots of people just incapable of moving forward spiritually, because they're either so gross and locked up, or they're just they're a first time, they are an animal in a past life or something. They're not. This is their first human life, or they haven't gone up to a level where they can move forward spiritually. Everyone has that potential in them. They just haven't they haven't had enough time as a human being, or whatever it might be. And so it's a small percentage of people. I've talked about this so many times that you can live 40 days or so without food, whatever it is, the record is. Food is gross. grosser, more his food is food, water 3 days, air 10 minutes, and love not at all, right? Love, the love energy is responsible for your whole life, your soul. You can't live a second without your soul, but it's not demanded. You're not. It's not something that you like. Breathing is automatic, and your knowledge of love energy is non-existent. And so like breathing happens automatically. Of course, you have to choose to eat, and you have to choose to drink, and you have cravings for both. Like your body will tell you when it's hungry and tell you when it's thirsty, right? So it's something that, and it feels good. It's pleasurable to eat and drink, even water that has no taste when you're thirsty, right? The sensation of cold water when you're out working and things. And breathing, like if you haven't, if you're holding your breath, it feels good to breathe. But, people don't appreciate love energy. That just without it, nothing exists, right? The idea of God and, is love energy. It's the idea that you can't exist at all in any form, physical or etheric, without love energy. But you don't need it. And you don't, at least not at it's a very subtle need that people have. Of course, people are suffering all the time because they don't have love energy. They're lonely, they're miserable, they're depressed, they don't have any purpose in their existence. They're going backwards, they feel like shit, they're crazy, all because they haven't recognized their soul's purpose. Everybody who is walking around life and isn't engaging in some aspect of their soul's purpose, they have a purpose. Their soul has a purpose, and you have a role to fill. And if you haven't connected with that, which is probably the majority of people, maybe 70%, maybe 90%, even a little bit, like even unconsciously. Some people, they're living, the life they're supposed to live unconsciously. They're not conscious of God and having a soul and having a soul's path. They just stumble on it and they feel congruent with it, so they keep on going. They have a role to fill. Maybe somebody like Trump who has a role to fill, which is, to bring down this system, for example, and he's doing it. And he feels good about it because it's what his assignment is, even though he has no spiritual energy. He's demonic on every level, big, giant ego, narcissist. But those are also part of, him doing what he's doing so that, he's not suffering. I mean, of course, you see he is suffering, but, like there's something there that he's doing without conscious knowledge. But the people who consciously are aware of their soul's path and are actively pursuing a relationship with their soul and the divinity within them is a fraction of the population. And those people are all struggling. And the Sajmark system is the best system ever for this process. It exists, solely to make this connection between your ego and your material life and integrate it with your spiritual goals and your spiritual and essence inside and this divinity within you, and exists for you to make that connection and then facilitate the growth of that connection and learn how to take this partnership forward. And there's nothing like it, like all these other spiritual systems and psychological systems. I mean, going back to this Carl Jung thing, I mean, why would Jimmy Dore be talking about Carl Jung? Well, he has nothing else. He's like, well, people don't know about this. People don't read Jung. Yeah, there's a reason why people don't read him. There's a reason why people don't do psychoanalysis, which is Freud's. Freud was was like the first psychiatrist, and psychiatrists are the fucking worst. They're the fucking worst in the mental health field. Psychiatrists are physical, allopathic doctors, and as you go to school to be a doctor. And then the people who take the psychoanalytical approach are very few, like even psychiatrists. But what psychiatrists do now is they're pill poppers. Like, there's only a few, like if you're like a nurse on RN that gets a degree in psychology, you might be able to write prescriptions. If you're, there's certain levels of being a PhD, psychology, doctor of psychology, and you can write prescriptions. But mostly it's psychiatrists that write prescriptions for psychological drugs, right? Because they're like illegal doctors, these psychiatrists, but they're the worst. They go in treatment centers and places like that, mental institutions, and all they do is see patients and write scripts. That's all they care about. They think there's a chemical way, these horrible fucking medications, and that's the solution. They don't really do any kind of therapy or any kind of thing like that, right? So, you know, and obviously, if people are getting crazier, like if people are getting more demonic and are moving away from God, that means your religion sucks, or people suck, or both. But in this case, it's both, right? It's all people sucking is always part of it. But if you have now widespread counseling, like how many people see counselors and do some sort of process with therapists, and not all therapists are bad. Some of them are healers, right? Like I said, that there are a lot of doctors who aren't healers, but you could be an allopathic doctor. I had an allopathic doctor who was a real healer. He delivered my second child, right? He was a wonderful doctor, but he had gone beyond the allopathic medicine, and he had healing energy. Like there's people who just are healers, right? But being a doctor and a healer, just like you can be a priest and not be religious or spiritual. The majority of people who are clergy have very little spirit. They're not on a spiritual path at all. They don't really have a conscious relationship with God. They might think so, but all these things are, it's situational to the person. But what kind of method are you using is important. Like if you're a healer, the allopathic medicine is not the best medicine to be a healer. It's there's things that are good about allopathic medicine if for operations. There's things that are but I mean, not the operations all are shitty. Like it's a bad way to deal with shit, right? To cut out some cancer or whatever it might be. It's like I mean, there's better ways. Like there's other ways to deal with these issues before you need an operation, like preventative medicine and healing energy, right? So to be a healer, you could be an allopathic doctor and be a healer, but you'd be much better suited if you were in one of the better systems or better traditions. It becomes about the system, right? And the systems we have now of psychology, where people are getting more and more crazy, right? Like we can all agree on that. People are getting more and more crazy, more and more depressed, more and more entitled, more and more lonely, more and more incapable, less capable. People are weaker, idiocracy on one hand, but psychologically and emotionally weaker each generation. So we can say that that's not working, right? Like people are getting worse psychologically and all the things with it. Spiritually, our religion isn't working, obviously. People are moving more and more away from God. So these systems aren't working. It's always about having the best system. Like if you are you willing to be to move forward as a person? Did I say Barkus is willing? Did I say that thing in the beginning of this video? Maybe, I think my last video, I don't know. But are you willing? Like, God's willing, but are you willing? And so, then I could say almost everybody, the answer is no. So fuck people, fuck humanity, right? It's, if it's the solution's there and you don't find it, or you hear about the solution and you don't do anything about it, and you're miserable and things are going the wrong direction and you need to change and the world needs to change and that there has to be. So, if there's a system to degrade humanity, then there's always going to be an equal system, a better system to uplift humanity, right? Like if there's a system to pull people down, which our system is, enslave people, which you realize is a truther, that's what our system fucking does, then there has to be an equal system, better system, to reverse that. You're always given the antidote. Oftentimes the antidote's right there with the poison, which it is in your heart, right? All the grossness that you accumulate goes to your heart, all the samskaras, all the, spiritual grossness. And your soul also exists in the same area. It's where you feel God's love. Like your heart is both the seat of grossness, the seat of, your depravity, and it's also a place where your solution, your soul, and your spiritual journey begins. And so the Sajmark system and the Gratefulness meditation is something that, facilitates this. It's a solution to the problem of humanity that people have to change. And all these other people that are just talking about these things, waiting for, I don't know, their audience to wake up and do something. Will somebody please do something? Oh, let's appeal to the dumb fucks, or let's appeal to the controllers, the two groups of people that are incapable of changing. The people who run the system, they're locked into it, and they're so gross and they're so fucked in the head that in the heart, and they have no chance of rising up. You can't count on them. The people with money and power, they're not the solution. When would anybody believe that those people are the solution? And the dumb fucks that are remedial motherfuckers who, are eating carcinogens and heart disease. They walk through, Walmart with a cart full of heart disease and carcinogens, and they're, and you're going to wake them up and they're going to be like better than you, and they're going to fucking carry this over the top. Like, so it's silly. The truth community's silly. All these people are fucking silly, and most of them are just, finding new ways to talk about things as a way to, gain an audience or whatever it might be. The Jimmy Dores and the Tucker Carlsons and all those people, they're ilk. They're ilk. And so, that's what this is about. They're parasites who are grifting on, they're preventing you from finding they're not a stepping stone. I used to think that people like Alex Jones might be a stepping stone. Like, people come in and they've learned about shit from Alex Jones, and, and maybe in the truth community, they are a stepping stone where you're like, all right, this guy's full of shit. But there are other people who are better. And you move along until you get to be real people who are, are not shills and not whatever. But still, the truth community is a fucking joke. Like, it's, at some point you realize the system's fucked. And it's taking you in the wrong direction. And then you got to search for a solution. And that most people don't graduate to that. Because the solution's always spiritual. And if they can't do that, then you're just mired in with the rest of the fucking, there's no awakening. The true awakening is a spiritual awakening. It's an awakening to your true purpose. And if you can't do that, and, or you won't, if you can't do that, fine. But if you won't do that, like if you have the capability, but you won't, the people who can't, they can't. But the people who won't, they can, but they won't. All right. So, that's where humanity's at right now, bro. So, Lindsey Graham is one of the worst. I always knew he was a piece of shit. Closeted gay Republican, which is always funny, but is always fucked up. And he's always been a piece of shit. Like, he was always on the wrong side of whoever, like, he's just been he's a Joe Biden kind of guy just in there, working his way up just a sleazebag. And him and Trump got into it where Trump gave out his personal phone number. And he did a video of himself destroying cell phones. Like, that was his comeback. And then he became the most taint-licking guy for Trump. But also it became apparent that he is the most owned guy about Israel. And then he said this.
Thank y'all. We won. So, I want to start with a bunch of thank yous. I want to thank the big guy, God. Trump comes later. Mr. President, you're not far behind God, but we're going to start with him.
Holy shit. Mr. President, you're not far behind God. You know nothing about God, but certainly Trump is a fucking demon. Like I said, Trump, certainly is doing God's work in terms of destroying a system that needs to come down. So there's that. And, I can't evaluate, what his soul knows or doesn't, or what his, what he's going to owe afterwards in terms of his, like if you do God's work, there's always, I don't want to say a reward, but there's, you can play a villain and do God's work. And if he does God's work successfully, which will be taking down the system, which is, I don't know if his horrible personality and his gross fucking job of the HUD, everything, I don't know what, in terms of having to pay off that shit, like that's not for me to evaluate. Like, I'm not a spiritual bean counter. I have no idea, what you're, everyone can figure out for themselves by what they feel. Right, you can feel your there's two conditions. There's spiritual approach, and there's spiritual condition. Your approach is your proximity to God, and your spiritual condition is how clean you are. And people can have like a low-level spiritual approach but be clean, or people can have a higher spiritual approach but accumulate grossness and be like not like gross. Not dirty isn't the right word. Anyway, so, I can't say that for Trump, what is and what isn't. But, he's not close to God. He's not a godly person. And this, his ego and his whatever he is right now, despite whatever success he has for filling his role. So this is Rob Whitman, and he is going to be accosted by I don't like this kind of, ambush journalism. I don't, whatever. I mean, when it's funny, it's funny. When it's funny, then great, do it more. Like, this is hilarious. So he's going to fake a phone call. You can see from his phone, like his cheek is inadvertently tapping the apps, right? So he pulls out his phone here.
Congressman, what is Mike Johnson's secret plan to cut Social Security?
Hey, how you doing? I'm good. I'm good.
Look, it's like you see, it's changing apps. It's hitting different apps.
With that, yeah, I'll be there in just a few minutes.
No response, sir?
I'm heading your way right now.
Watch the phone.
It's over at 416.
Congressman, what is Mike Johnson's secret plan to cut Social Security?
Listen, I appreciate that. I've got some more efforts that I want to talk to you about. There are actually more things that we have to be working on. Yeah, I want to make sure that we're putting
No response, sir?
bill. Yeah, listen, thanks.
Okay, so he's going to say thank you. Here, look at this woman. Okay, so is he faking a phone call again? Now, if he was doing something important here, he certainly wouldn't want to do it in front of a hostile journalist with a video camera, right? With a phone on, where he's videotaping him. He's taking video of him. All of us who are of a certain age, we'll call it videotaping, or like when tapes no longer exist, it's digital. The Blockbuster days. But here he is, having this phone call, and he's going to say goodbye now for the rest of there's another over a minute and 10 seconds left in this thing.
Thanks. I appreciate your help on this. I really do need some more of your input. Yeah, if you can actually reach out, I'll make sure that we do more of this.
Okay, it should end here.
Listen, I really appreciate it. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Yes, I believe me, I understand. There's more of those things that we need to work on. Yes. Well, thanks again.
Okay.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Congressman, what is Mike Johnson's secret plan to cut Social Security?
And like you see right there what he did the app. Like that's not a phone call. That's like, and he goes at it. And you can never hear the other person's voice. Like you'd be able to hear the other person's voice because he's got good audio there. He walks like a fucking retarded. All right, that's what's great. Now Candace Owens sucks as bad as Erika Kirk. Her content is more tolerable, obviously. Erika Kirk is just so bad, in terms of her fucking, the sheepleness of her and her audience, whatever she is, right? And so this woman came out and is hammering Candace Owens with biblical fucking verses.
Exodus 22:22. You shall not afflict any widow or fatherless child if you afflict them in any way, and they cry out at all to me.
So Candace has put up a widow counter here.
I will surely hear their cry, and my wrath will be hot.
Hot.
Deuteronomy 27:18. Cursed is the one who perverts the justice due, the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow. Isaiah 1:17, learn to do good, seek justice, rebuke the oppression, defend the fatherless, plead for the widow.
The widow. Like, is all you have is that Erika Kirk is a widow, right? And she's not a real one, because, like, obviously there's no love there. Like, she would have actually grieved. I mean, she didn't love Charlie Kirk. Who knows if she's actually even a lesbian or something. We have whatever their sham marriage, whether those kids are even real. She's a fucking asset for whatever it is. But, widow in this modern times is a lot more different. Is different because you know what? Erika Kirk can remarry anytime she wants. Like she's in a position where she has plenty of suitors, so like this isn't where like the biblical times where your husband dies and you're fucked. Like no one's going to marry you and take over your kids. And, I mean, that's just that was the time, no one wants that situation. There was no divorce. It wasn't like this idea that people would marry multiple times. Like you were a widow, like your husband died, you were fucking done. For a husband who was a widower, it was even hard, but not as hard. Like women are always screwed. So you had those kids, and you were now, you had basically fatherless kids, and you were gonna, the whole thing, and people are gonna take advantage of you or whatever it might be. I mean, men would have sex with a widow, but they're marrying her, and and a widow was very vulnerable, like not having a husband, especially brutal times, and so the widow would be, something where it's almost like being a leper, like it's just. There's cultures like that now where you become a widow and there's no chance of you getting married, like some of these more like Amish or these type of cultures that still have that kind of attitude. So this would apply to those people, not Erika Kirk, who is now she's the CEO of her husband's company, multi-millionaire and a recognizable. I mean, her brand, as bad as she's damaged it. She's got a following and a whole thing there at TPUSGay. And I'm going to check in with the Twinks too. But, so this doesn't really apply to her. She didn't properly grieve. Probably is involved with her husband's murder or whatever the fuck that was. And like trying to play the widow card.
Woo! Jeremiah 22:3, do no wrong and do no violence to a stranger, the fatherless, or the widow.
The widow.
Malachi.
The widow.
Okay, so then she goes through this thing at the end.
A defender of widows.
Widows. Widows. Widows. The widow. You shall honor the widow. You shall worship the widow.
So, when your biggest card, they're playing the widow card, is easily mocked by your much more popular opponent. They get no views, they get no love at TPUSGay. They're the president there, right? And Candace Owens is going to get 1 million or so views. I don't know on this video particularly, maybe even more, these little short videos. Erika Kirk has so many haters. Like, people don't even love Candace Owens, but they hate Erika Kirk. And you're playing the fucking widow card. The late to the party people are worse than anybody else. Because they are people who, Tucker Carlson's a huge late to the party person. But even worse are these Democrats who now all of a sudden, these, mainstream media people who are still pushing these lies, wouldn't admit Joe Biden was fucking senile when they all knew he was fucked. And then they were always demeaning and diminishing the idea of the Epstein scandal, and now all of a sudden they're all about it, right? The people who are complicit with the whole Biden-Trump dynamic, right? Who were, the whole thing.
The outcome President Trump has tried and failed to prevent. Congress drawing new testimony from a key witness, Epstein's assistant of 18 years. Lawmakers now following leads that the Trump DOJ and its predecessors apparently abandoned, or worse, that Trump officials recently hid. So it's vital to recall how...
Okay, so you now have the Democrats on board, and you have all the Epstein people. Marjorie Taylor Greene's, all the Republicans, all the true Epstein people in MAGA and the Republican side, and all the truth community, all the people who want, all the victims, all these people. I think 80% of people want Epstein justice. Like you've won everybody over. Before you had trouble convincing people. People were coming up to my wife saying, "Oh, you were right about Pizzagate," when she told them like fucking 10 years ago. You have people coming around, right, from all facets. So you have everything. You have Democrats, you have Republicans, you have all this stuff. Obviously, you don't have the Republicans because Trump's blocking it. And when Trump gets disempowered and the Democrats take over, they can really use this as a cudgel to beat Trump and get some real justice and get these people prosecuted. And it's not gonna be one person. It's not gonna be one thing that fucking happens. There's not going to be, I mean, maybe there's be a sacrificial lamb like a Bernie Madoff, but I'd be shocked, right? There's going to be nothing. Like, so you have everything to make this a winning issue. Every Democrat could run on this thing, and Republicans who want to, the whole thing, especially post-Trump. When Trump's no longer able to block the Epstein thing, there's never going to be justice for this thing. You're never going to get the fucking truth. Nothing's ever going to happen. The truth is out there already. You have the truth, but, there's nothing discovered. So just that shows you that this is all meaningless, right? The Epstein thing is, an exercise in futility. Like this guy's trying to say, Trump's new Epstein problem returns with blockbuster testimony from his person. There's nothing here, right? Epstein scandal roars back.
We got here. Even if Donald Trump wishes, this was not the top story tonight. First, last
It's not the top story. Like, it's the top story for you.
year, then Attorney General Bondi claimed in writing that there was actually no evidence for any other investigations.
Okay, so, I don't want to go through this. But there's a term that I've coined here. It's not, my term. It's existed before. But these late to the party motherfuckers, here, and whether it be Jimmy Dore or it be this guy or all these people, there's really no party. But, they're jumping on something the ship has sailed. The time to be a part of the time to call bullshit on Trump's fake assassination thing was before the election. And the time for the Jeffrey Epstein thing was years ago. Like it's, before he was killed. I mean, all these things. And so, now these things, it's run its course already. And there's no, system in place for accountability. Like that's what you should gather from the truth community. That the so-called rich people never pay because of the system. They pay because of, divine justice. It's like you don't have to worry about all these things when there's divinity that can, that everything's accounted for. Like, people get too caught up in wanting some kind of systemic punishment for the wrongdoers, and nobody gets away with anything. Like I can say that 100% with 100% confidence, in terms of my experiences and what I know about the divine system of everything's accounted for. Either it is or it isn't. It's either whole, it's chaos, or it's everything's accounted for. Like nobody gets away with anything, ever. Whatever you do, you're going to have to pay for in this life or another. Your soul is, some future version of yourself. You might be a much better person, some future version, spiritually evolved, and you still got shit that happens, things that you did years and years ago. Maybe I'll talk about that more at the end. I'll do that in a voiceover so I can. Anyways, let's move on. Let's go visit in the two Twinks. I haven't done the laugh in a while. Okay, so Tom Filton exposed it all. FBI's Butler cover-up. So maybe we'll take a look at that because, and California's 873 dirty ballots, 7,000 views. Jasmine Crockett used the SPLC meeting to come after Charlie Kirk. Carmelo Anthony learns his fate. So I saw this on Fox News. I was going through the channels while I was eating. And Carmelo Anthony is a famous basketball player that spells his name with a C. And I'm like, why haven't I heard about this guy stabbing somebody? And then I'm like, wait, this guy spells his name with a K and he's a kid? He knifed somebody. And now I see who he knifed is a white guy. Right? So now I know why Fox News was covering it. I was like, why is Fox News covering this guy who's got, Carmelo Anthony's name? And here, Charlie shows Erika. It's on video. The trolls have no answer. 8.4 thousand views. All right, so we got some things to work with. There's a little two Twinks. I searched. I couldn't remember what the name of it was. I couldn't remember Charlie Kirk's name. And I was like, I started to type in the two Twinks. And I'm like, well, that's not going to give me any results. I type in Instagool all the time and things like that. Anyways, let's get to it here. Okay, so here they are.
A little bit of leftist craziness, and Savannah Hernandez gave a great comment on this. SOT 22.
The fact that we have people outside that were swarming one of our entrances with clear Antifa emblems, wearing Antifa shirts and chanting that they're Antifa, goes to show me that there's a lot of work that still needs to be done.
What work is that? What the fuck are you talking about? You know, how many people are really concerned about Antifa? Like, like right now, like, you know, on the list of concerns people have, right wing, left wing people, well, all the right wing, because left wing people don't give a shit about Antifa. But all the right wing people out there, all the people in the truth community, all the people who are watching what's going on in the world, and Antifa is not on the list, right? It's, you know, this is fake stuff. You know, why would Antifa be outside of Charlie Kirk's thing when it's imploded? Like you're kicking a fucking dead horse. Is that it? Kicking a dead dog? Kicking a dead horse? I don't know. Beating a dead horse? I don't know. Beating a dead horse. I mean, why would you bother? Like, this is a corpse. It's a fucking corpse. It's Antifa. There's Antifa.
Radical left-wing violence needs to be dismantled. It's one of the last things that Charlie talked about before he was taken from us. How serious this issue is.
Somebody sent me a video clip yesterday of one of these fucking bimbo Trump, there's a blonde bimbo Trump person saying Trump rocks MSG. And they show a video of Trump coming into a stadium with all of his American Trump shit. It's obviously not Madison Square Garden, where he got booed fucking viciously. And he came in there with that song. You know, that fucking gay-ass song they play all the time. And this person was pretending, or I don't know, it was a joke. I think it was just for the dumb fucks that who wouldn't see any other source of news, that Trump walked into Madison Square Garden with a standing ovation while they played his song, and that was not at all the case. Like he fucking, you know, all these people, the parking people. Stephen A. Smith did a whole kind of try to do a takedown because Trump said he was stupid. And Stephen A. Smith was giving a speech in front of a flag like he's pretending he's going to run for president. I mean, you know, crazier things have happened because Trump's elected, but Stephen A. Smith is a fucking joke and a, you know, clown. And, you know, he goes on tour with Bill O'Reilly and Chris Cuomo's. He's a total sellout, right? And, you know, whatever. And he leans sort of to the right, and in the African American community, there's some rumblings about him being a sellout and a piece of shit. So, you know, so he isn't even, you know, whatever. But he tried to make the case, which was easy to make, that Trump isn't a real New York Knicks fan, and he's selfish because all the parking lots, which, you know, first of all, everybody in that area was inconvenienced, right, by Stephen A. Smith. I mean, by Trump. Like, they had to close down multiple roads. Everyone had to get to the stadium a half hour early or earlier. They're all in their seats long before they normally would. All the street vendors who make money on the game, all the people who, the parking lots that are there had to be closed down. You know, so Trump inconvenienced and cost people money. I mean, we're talking about maybe hundreds of thousands of people in New York City. We're inconvenienced by the roads being closed, all these things, so he can attend a game and fall asleep because he doesn't give a shit, doesn't know any of the players, and he's entitled because he has season tickets that he hasn't sat in a seat there for, you know, 20 years. And Stephen A. Smith was trying to make the case that he wasn't good for business, and he wasn't a good Knicks fan, and he wasn't a real New Yorker. And I'm like, yeah, like he's a demon. Like, it's so much worse than that, right? But, you know, all these things. But, you know, this whole thing is it's just silly, right? This fucking Antifa bullshit and all this left-right bullshit.
And again, what was happening outside was not peaceful protest. What was happening outside was not the First Amendment. The left wing is not allowed to terrorize us. They are not.
How they terrorize? All right, so let's get to this.
A little taste here. This was the San Antonio police clashing with them on the streets outside the event. 48.
That's crazy, those Antifas. I mean, look at those Antifas.
Of the opposing faction, he is actually campaigning. But to do this at just a turning point event where it's just young women hearing speakers, talking about faith, talking about family, there's something really...
These young women. All right, so I decided to check in I wanted to do the laugh again. That was my major motivation. Blake laugh. These two twinks, these two beta males sharing one testicle. You know, like this is horrible content. Nobody gives a shit about your fucking victimization. And why would Antifa show up for this thing? I mean, did you pay them? Like, because there's nothing here. You guys got fucking nothing. Nobody watches your videos. This video's got 8,000 views. Let's go further in here. See where they have the thing about the Erika Kirk thing here.
And so we decided over the weekend we were going to troll the trolls. There's this video that has become a source of controversy. Getting prescription medications.
Oh, there we go. They got ad.
It's about peace of mind. Go to allfamilypharmacy.com/Kirk and use the code Kirk10 for 10%
Get all
off.
your pharmaceuticals, your antidepressant bullshit that you guys need because you're all fucked in the head, right?
Stay ready. Take control today. Visit allfamilypharmacy.com/Kirk.
Not even controversy, just obsession from bizarre people.
Yeah, just
from bizarre people. So bizarre. These people are so bizarre.
Absurd. I don't even talk about it because I think the whole thing is so lame. And if
they
you're
demand
online,
overwhelming proof for the idea that Charlie loved his wife and would want his wife to carry on his mission.
Yeah.
Okay. That's, there is no proof he loved his wife. I mean, they seem to be pretty perturbed with her. They don't seem to be a real couple. But aside from that, I don't give a shit. Like, I fucking, I'm 100% for Erika running TPUSGay. I'm 100% for these two beta males to continuously be the face and the people running the now defunct show. I want to see TPUSGay continuously go farther and farther into the abyss because it sucks. Charlie Kirk was a piece of shit. He was a fucking, I mean, in life, in death, it doesn't matter. He was a piece of shit. Charlie Shekels took all this money. His whole thing was fucked. This whole thing was bullshit. The Old Testament, bullshit, all the stuff that I talk about here. I'm 100% into this thing crumbling in front of my eyes. That's what I hope for. Erika Kirk has been the worst CIO appointment. I mean, what TPUSGay used to be. Unless they're 100% about laundering money, that's what they're doing. And this is just whatever they're doing here doesn't matter. Like, none of it is. It's just to launder money. Because, I mean, their business has crumbled. They should have, they have 600 employees that would cost like $20 million a year to fund. So unless they're laundering money, and I don't know how many people they fired, I don't know how many, they've cut back. But it's no longer a successful show. It's no longer successful events. This Antifa thing, I mean, why would Antifa show up to something that's like, it's like they're trolling a cancer patient who's, dying, and they show up at the hospital to mock the person, right? Like, you already fucking won. Like, the TPUSGay has crumbled. But, in all that, there's a video, and they're going to show it here.
Well, it's something.
Look at this, Blake. Look at this. What's his reaction here?
His wife to carry on his mission.
Yeah. Well, it's something he told all of us. We all knew. We didn't talk about it because we thought Charlie was going to be with us for another 50 plus years. But we all knew, the board knew, this was the plan.
Okay, so there's some evidence that he told Erika that he told Candace. She's got conversations and some evidence that she's shown. Candace Owens is not credible because remember the whole thing with Candace Owens in Fort Huachuca, remember? And that guy Mitch Snow. I mean, I got to bring that meme back sometime. Like, she's got no credibility, and that thing just went away because she knew it was bullshit what she did. But this guy Andrew Culver talked to Charlie Kirk about his death quite often. Charlie Kirk was always talking about it. In fact, there's exchanges between him and Candace talking about it. So to say he was going to be around for 50 years, but they always are talking about left-wing violence. And whenever they talk about left-wing violence, it's about how the left-wing murdered Charlie Kirk, right? Which is silly. The whole thing where, nobody believes this other than their remaining dopey followers.
Whatever. He said it one time in front of a camera at a private event with donors in Aspen. So we figured we'd troll the trolls, and you get a little taste of it here. SOT 21.
For 250 years.
That's great. Her kissing there, Charlie, and pointing to her.
Well, I thought that clip, I played the wrong clip, but there's a clip that we did play of basically Charlie says it was in the montage of Charlie saying, Erika will be CEO. It's what?
41. All right.
Okay,
let's
we have
do
enough
that
time?
very quick.
41.
41.
You mean to have enough time?
The most important relationship in your life is the one that you have with your Lord and Savior Jesus Christ.
His passion was my passion, and now his mission is my mission.
I appoint my wife to run Turning Point USA if something happens to me.
Okay, so how is that trolling the trolls? I mean, anything could be AI faked at this point, but I hope it's real. But the thing about it is, the time to show this this clip would have been right after he died, right, or shortly thereafter. I mean, they were so gaudy about everything, so performative about everything, that it wasn't going to be in poor taste to show it right after, some portion after he died. Him saying this, right? Like, so there'd be no doubt, because she's run the company into the ground. So that was probably going to happen. I don't know whether they foretold. I don't know if it's part of a plan. I don't know what's this, right? But the time to show something like this is when she takes over CEO. And again, she would have if there's, this is not a publicly traded company. So it's nonprofit. I don't know how it's run, but she should have ownership, right? This is Charlie Kirk's thing. And she should be the one who have ownership, unless they sold ownership to many of the pro, Zionist donors. Like, maybe she doesn't own anything. Maybe there's not, who knows, what the people who have, this is their property. Because Charlie Kirk didn't pay for this. People paid to create him as he got owned and funded by pro-Israeli donors to hundreds of millions of dollars. So that's where the money came from. And, they're not poor business people, right? like they have a stake in this company, whatever it is. And I don't know the breakdowns. I'm not a business person. But maybe she doesn't own it. Like, I don't know what her role is. And so, they could have just squeezed her out. But she's doing everything they want her to do. And, and anybody doing that is going to take Charlie was already seeing that everyone was turning on Israel. And so he was already fucked, right? Personally, like, the TPUSGay was going to go down. Because he was either going to have to choose his funders and support a message that his fans no longer supported, a pro-Israeli message, a pro-Zionist message. So Charlie was fucked. He was either going to lose his audience, or he was going to lose his controllers, or his handlers, his bankers. And so he couldn't survive without those two things. And, and Trump was going to implode. Like, again, he couldn't ride the Trump train anymore either. Like, the whole thing was, the MAGA movement and everything was going to disintegrate. And so he was in a shitty position. And Erika Kirk is in that same position, but far less likable. And they no longer carry any weight or sway. It's no longer an organization that's an influencer. And so let's wrap it. I'll go back to tell you in a voiceover why they should have released it earlier.
Erika would do a great job.
All right, so that's the clip. Thank you.
You cut him off, you dumb fuck.
Thank you, studio, for bailing me out there. But So we knew that it was going to be like, oh, it's AI or it's fake or whatever this, because that's what they do. They always move the goalpost here. And
They do that. They do that. Who's they?
Why it's a sucker's game to even play this. But it was really fun to be able to troll the trolls, stuff it in their face, and then watch them predictably melt down when the evidence was shown.
Okay, that's the evidence. You have one clip of him saying she'd do a great job because he's fucking wrong. So you're saying that Charlie's words about this was wrong? His decision was horrible? Because TPUSGay has imploded. Like, at least acknowledge that you guys get no views, no love, no respect. Let's go to the comments here, see if there's any, see if they've deleted them yet. Charlie chose Erika. It's on video. The trolls have no answer. First comment. Let's see the speech in its entirety. This is so fake. You expect us to believe that Charlie went against everything he believed for years. A point to Erika. He believed a woman was to be in the home. The widow. I think TPUSGay and Erika Kirk are both pretty tone deaf. They don't understand how or why they keep looking worse in public. Guys, please, this is so cringe. Stop, stop, stop. Just stop, stop, stop. We decide to troll the troll stuff is in their face and watch them predictably melt down. You should be ashamed. This is a mockery of Charlie. Erika Kirk not only protects pedophiles, she promotes and works with them by choice. This is her family. What do you call it when someone doubles down like a million times? I guess if you say it enough, then one day you might even believe it yourself. Blake knows a lot about saying gross things. How can he sit there and know he's guilty of many things? We the people are not stupid. Such stooges. Pathetic. Yeah, we trolled the people by lying to them to get a reaction. This is their version of Christianity. Do you have an item who checks the comments? Do you have an intern who checks the comment? Probably. Hi, TPUSGay. Hi, TPUSGay is not about truth. All right, so they're all negative. Look, the Andrew Blake show. I mean, this is, and they've had people go through these comments. And this video is only got 8,000 views, right? And almost all of them are negative comments. And so, like, they don't show you the amount of thumbs downs. But out of 8,000 views, 600 people hit like, no positive comments, and it's just a mess. And they have people now who go through their comment section. And so let's go to the other video real quick here. I'm editing. I want to add something. Bunch of new stuff for my next video. All kinds of weird shit popping. I wish I could put it in this video, but it's already too long. So, and it'll just be good for next video. It gives me a head start. But anyways, so this first comment where the person said Charlie Kirk believes the mother should be at home. Now, my ex was like really good at being a student. She was an A student, top of her class in high school, went to a Ivy League school, right, Wellesley, and was very liberal and into like liberal stuff. Erika Kirk reminds me of her in, not so much in, well, I guess they kind of were both kind of have those pie faces, whatever, but more in her like kind of personality. Both Scorpio women who, take pride in that or whatever it is. And my ex, of course, was abused by her dad, mom, and, let everybody know it, within the first like 10 minutes of meeting her. But she was like one of those people, perfectionist. And when she started to do the meditation, Sajmarg meditation, she wanted to learn to be a good, conservative, Indian type of housewife. But there wasn't a lot of, information about that in America. So she wanted to, she was a liberal woman who went to a liberal school, college, with hippie kind of, she's a boomer, I'm Generation X. She was 5 years older than me. And she, started to engage with these Christian fundamentalists. There was a moms of many children, and she pretended to be a Christian because she wanted to learn about their conservative ways. And some of these women were, they wore like, the woman who ran it wore like a head covering. She wasn't Amish, but, there's a lot of these. She wasn't Amish or Mennonite, but she was, very conservative Christian. They covered their heads and, very pilgrimy, this kind of thing. And, also in the tradition of Saj Marg, which, the women work. There's a lot of like women in the Indian culture that work now. Women have become doctors, but, this idea of the housewife staying home, because raising kids and being a mom and being a wife is a full-time job. And I've talked about that before. Working's okay. I'm not a fundamentalist. Like, everyone has to figure out what their situation is. But, moms being at home is important because, and being a good, godly woman and being, all these things. And so I understand that belief. And, I talked about this in a video called Just a Mom, which a lot of people, that's one of my their favorite videos of mine. I think I made it available on the members program again. It's about this saying, just a mom, and liberal, feminist women talk about being just a mom. Like, you have to also have a career. But, if you have a career, your motherhood's going to suffer. Just like anything. The old tradition where if you're a father at home with a farm, you're going to work with your kids and spend a lot more time with them and guide them. And, it's going to be, you're going to be a better parent. Like, mostly, not, guaranteed, but it's set up for a better parental situation. But Charlie Kirk believed in that, right? Charlie Kirk believed in all that kind of shit. So, he, and his wife believed in it. She talked about it all the time. Like, you could have your little side hustle and have some social media, but she talked about being a stay-at-home mom, and they both believed that. So it wouldn't make sense for him to leave the corporation to her, leave the, I don't think that would have been a legitimate plan of his. He might have had a succession plan, and as much as he talked about worried somebody might kill him, all these kind of things. Whatever this whole thing could be staying. Who knows if he even was a real person? I don't know. But in terms of all these things, this persona, people who are, those type of Christians believe that the mom should stay at home, and she could have taken some kind of a role, a supervisory role, and still been a mom. But she was not involved with a lot of the stuff that he did because she was at home. Remember, Daddy's home, Shabbat Shalom, and she had cooked a dinner, and the meal was in the thing. I'll heat it up, all that stuff she talked about in that quote. And so the reality is that a lot of this shit don't add up, right? Don't add up, bro. And so, I hope she runs the company into the ground more and all these things. In terms of my content and in terms of the story arc, her disappearing isn't really, beneficial to any of us. But the reality is, I don't think, a lot of it doesn't add up. And, they need to answer that. Because she, talked about being a stay-at-home mom all the time, and she, wanted to be this conservative Christian mother, and then all of a sudden she's like, hey, I'm a fucking feminist CEO. And then she has this, this conference for women and how women are going to influence things. And, she can't say the same thing about being a stay-at-home mom because now she's a single mom and the kids are having less time with their one parent. She's not there for them on a daily basis. She's traveling. She's not, she's doing all kinds of things where the kids aren't even involved. And so, and her mom's fucking was dying. So, she didn't have a family support system. They have nannies and money and shit like that. But, whatever it is, that's a legitimate comment. The first comment I read in that section, that's a legitimate question. Why would she be the first choice? And was she really committed conservative wife who wanted to be a stay-at-home housewife if she moved into that position in a way that clearly she's into it? She, almost to the point where, not almost to the point, because we all think that she was at least somehow involved in this whole thing. If she didn't, kill him, she certainly didn't pull the trigger, but they couldn't have done it without her. So, and her just taking over. And then, Charlie was taking the organization in a direction where he was going to do an audit, which was, clearly those emails and things that were leaked to Candace Owens, number one. And number two, he was moving away from his support with Israel, and he was starting to do interviews and talk about it. and then he was whacked. And then they've gone back that last phase of his time there, where he was going to do an audit and he was questioning things, and he was thinking about bringing Candace Owens back, and there was, he was going after Israel more, and he was upset about what's going on with Iran and Israel's influence on Trump, and he was moving in that direction, and they've just pretended that didn't happen. They pretended like he wasn't doing that at all. In fact, they've gone the opposite. And any sort of conspiratorial thing, any questioning the government. Of course, now they're questioning the FBI about, you'll see in a second, about Trump's assassination attempt. Why would they do that if Trump's running the FBI? Like, why would they block it? Like, they have a conspiracy, but the conspiracy doesn't involve Trump, and it was his own attempt. And, I just covered this with Tucker Carlson as well. It's because it's fake as fuck, bro. And Trump is like an actor, and he played you. All right, so let's move on to the next thing here.
A lot of stuff going on with Butler, Pennsylvania, and the attempted assassination against President Trump that just, it just keeps raising these questions. What do we know? What do we not know? And one man, as we've become accustomed to, is like a dog with a bone on this, and that is Tom Fitton, president of Judicial Watch. And he's been FOIA-ing
He's been FOIA-ing? Why is he FOIA-ing? Stop FOIA-ing, you fuck. You creep you.
A crazy man, getting all the information we can, but it's drips and drabs, and we don't know exactly what it is. So I'll let him
frizzle drips
explain what he's found. Tom, welcome back to the show. It's great to have you. How are you doing? And tell us about this story. You've got 48 pages out of hundreds of thousands that are potentially out there. What's going on?
Yeah, we've been asking for records of the FBI.
I think this guy was on Tucker Carlson.
The shooting happened. And we've gotten stonewalled. We sued last year. Didn't get
You mean Kash Patel's FBI? So why don't they want to give you information about the shooting? It's because fucking Trump doesn't want you to know. Like, Trump is blocking this shooting like he was blocking Epstein. And these motherfuckers just won't say it. Let's get to see if Blake Neff has anything to say here. Is he here?
As we're reviewing the documents, that this was between a deputy and crooks. This actually,
because we were saying yesterday, the best way for the FBI to just restore the public's confidence in general is to be brisker about releasing documents they have with fewer
exactly. About like Charlie Kirk stuff and these other things like that, like do that stuff.
Actions and having clear explainations on the reasons they can't release other things. What's going on here?
Yeah.
What does need to change?
Well, the law's already the law. I mean, they weren't following the law. This FBI.
You mean this Trump's FBI? So you think it's like some kind of deep state thing that's disobeying Trump, or you think Trump has total control over the government right now and his people, and they're stonewalling it because it's fucking fake, right? All right. That's enough of these guys. Let's move over to a voiceover here. Okay, so I'm doing a voiceover. I was done with this video. And I got 2 comments in a row saying Paul Romano, which is, of course, my name, is the plaintiff here. And so I'm going to show you this here, and then you'll hear me discover it later on. Federal lawsuit aims to stop UFC event on the White House lawn. Plaintiff alleged that the June 14 event violates National Park Service regulations and benefits Trump and his allies. Look at the fucking devil's horns here. Like they've got, and then apparently there's lights and shit. I mean, it's just a mess. So here, there should be some guy here. Where do we get to the Paul Romano part? The suit names the National Park Service a member of its leadership, as well as the Interior Department of Interior Secretary Doug Burgum. The defendants, the Public Integrity Project, filed the suit on behalf of 2 plaintiffs, Susan Douglas, an activist, and Paul Romano, a Vietnam veteran who claims to be who claim in the filing that they are suffering anesthesia. What? And procedural, aesthetic, I'm sorry, and procedural harms as a result of the planned event. So this is a National Park Service that aesthetic, in terms of the damaging a national fucking place in the White House. There's a famous person named Paul Romano. Not famous. There's a singer named Paul Romano and an artist named Paul Romano, which I don't know how common the name is. But, in terms of, I'm not really. So this guy here, hardworking Paul Romano, that's not me. if you see the term hard work next to, well, I do, I have my moments. Hard work, Paul Romano. This is his fucking art. Like, look at this fucking demon art here. Or is this his music? The artwork from your Ghost Again is painted by longtime friend Paul Romano. Work hardened. His vision has undoubtedly always run parallel with ours. So I guess this isn't even his thing. This is his thing here. Mastodon Ghost Again. I think it might be some of Paul's best work. And this guy, Paul Romano, work hardened. This is some of his bullshit art. And so there's also a singer named Paul Romano who's faded. There's another piece of shit. Like these guys, this guy died. This fucking Paul Romano's dead. Fuck that guy. And then the thing here with the lawsuit, U.S. Mint. Paul Romano's an artist and designer. And so I guess the artist is, who is Paul Romano? Like, I think I'm the best Paul Romano. Like, fucking, can't I have that? Here I go with Amazon. There I am with my cow, my book. So, like, you have to go down for a while. I'm at the bottom of the page. Here I am on Amazon with this is me, and see if I can see the picture here. Open image, a new tab. There I am with my cow Phoebe at our first farm years ago when I was younger and thinner. But here's my book, The Choice, and then there's another book. Where's my other book? It's not here. My Friend Within. Here it is. All right. So, I'm on the first page, but now this other Paul Romano is trying to fucking come in with his bullshit lawsuit. But I think, I'm pretty much guaranteed, at least, I think I'm the best Paul Romano. Of all the Paul Romanos out there, I don't know how many there are. But I'm at least, I got to be top 5, right? Okay, so one thing I want to say here, I want to add something before we get into my other voiceover I already made. And I talk about this thing a little bit there. But there is a comedian named Chris Porter. And he was on Last Comic Standing, which I really liked that show. The first season was the best because they had more of a comics living together. And I don't know why people didn't like it, but it was very interesting. Of all the reality TV shows, it was comics who are really fucked up, and many of them are angry and depressed, and they're not really even all that funny. Like, sometimes they're funny, but they're, there's a lot of darkness and just interesting people. But he was on the third season. The thing just kind of went south. And he was a good comedian, professional. And he did a great special 3-4 years ago. You can find it on YouTube, for free. It was on Netflix for a while. But I think he ended his set with, he Googled his own name. And he found out there was a Chris Porter who was a gay porn star. And he didn't know if the guy's name was really Chris Porter or it was some guy he made fun of in some audience guy who heckled or something. So, I guess that's pretty much the worst. When you Google your own name and if you're, somebody who's, I don't want to say I'm in any way famous or a celebrity, but there's some thousands of people who, know me, right, from the internet, like, you know, kind of. I mean, I don't appear anywhere, and, you know, there's a few pictures of me here and there, but I'm not, you know, private, more of a private situation. But, you know, there were already famous Paul Romanos, like not real famous, but like I said, there was a singer and this artist, and I don't know if they're the same person. You know, I think there's quite a number of Paul Romanos out there. And now this motherfucker, this guy was coming in with his bullshit lawsuit, right? Which again, you know, is kind of a real one because Trump is definitely shouldn't be having the WWE or the UFC thing on his front lawn. And so one more thing I want to go before I get into my other voiceover, you know, going back to the beginning stuff I talked about Freud, you know, fraud and Jung and all these, you know, the psychology, the psychological, spiritual aspect of things from a mental perspective. You know, but stuff with like Jesus and these things, you know, I can't stress this enough, that when somebody dies and then there's a legend or myth about them, you know, it could be Spartacus or it could be, you know, I don't know who's some of the famous people, certainly the people in the Bible, and then all the people in the Mahabharata, Krishna, and all these people. You know, after some years, only a few years, a person's story is never accurate anymore. I mean, even when they're alive, a person's story isn't accurate. Like, you know, and this idea that in terms of just people who watch my videos, there's people who like me, people who hate me, and the people who like me often attribute things to me that aren't true in a good way. You know, they think more of me than I actually am. And so certainly the bad people, or the people who think that I'm, you know, that don't like me, the bad people, the people who don't like me, make shit up. And, you know, that's subjective. Like, they were talking about this, how the Knicks fans used to love Victor Wembanyama. He's a 7'5" French basketball player. But now that he's playing the Knicks and he just pushed down, you know, Jalen Brunson, who was acting a bit embellished. And, you know, now they hate the Spurs and they hate Victor Wembanyama. Like, it just becomes a rivalry because of, and then, you know, the way that they just, each fan sees the calls very subjectively and gets them angry. It's a whole thing that happens, right? I think people understand this. And that, like, if you hate a school, like you're an Ohio State person and anybody you meet from Michigan you hate, you know, these kind of things. You know, there's a prejudice there, and then you just make things up about those people. You know, willfully not wanting to like somebody without, you know, really justification and just making things up to fit your narrative, you know, changing the facts to fit your feelings kind of thing. And that has happened, you know, in real time with somebody who's alive, and even more so when they die. And, you know, when you make somebody into a religious, spiritual figure, and over thousands of years, you know, what you're getting about Jesus' life and who he was as a person, his essence and who he was is lost. And that's the same for Krishna. It's the same for anybody. Moses, Muhammad, any of these stories, right? They're going to be changed. They're going to be embellished. You all play that game of a phone call where you whisper in somebody's ear or something, and it goes in a circle and it comes out the other end, and it's never the same, right? It gets distorted over time. Like, it's a great lesson when you play that game as a kid. And that's how history is. And so when you start saying, well, this is the word of God, or this is what God said, well, who quoted God? Was somebody there with a video? Somebody taking notes? Did God talk directly to the person? Well, you know, like we did with Moses with a burning bush. You know, where does this story come from? Who's the author? Who edited it? Like, you know, over the centuries. How many times has it been edited? How many times has it been translated? You know, all these types of things have to be. Yeah, so like, you know, these religions, when they say this is the word of God or this is what God said, that's full of shit. Like, you know, at the very best, you have a highly developed spiritual master who is channeling God and speaks, you know, to a specific situation. And then, you know, that's whatever that is. And so, you know, and then it gets misinterpreted by people all along the way. Like, you know, in the Sajmark system, we had a living master. There was a living master since, you know, I don't know when Lology was sometime in the, you know, 1800s. I don't know, Babaji came on in 1945. And so as a living master, there was a 13-year break, which I talked about earlier. and there's a living master. Most of the through most of the 1900s and till 2014, and then Dodgy took over and failed, right? But during that time, people would debate about what the master meant about this or that, but you could go ask the guy, and no one wanted to ask him because it was usually humbling, right? What do you mean by this? Or people wanted to interpret things that in the way they wanted to see them, and that's just the way it was, even with a living person. And so, talking about Charlie Kirk's succession here, what was his intention for the organization? That's half the battle between people who were TPUSGay people who think Charlie was going to take it in this direction, and the people said no, that was just something he was dabbling with, but he really wanted to keep it in this direction. And the whole thing, it's all debatable, right? Whatever, the whole situation. And so you have to see things in that way, right? That's why you need a direct relationship with God. You got to be able to go to the source in some way. Because ultimately, even when you go to people and you ask them, channelers, people who are good with God, it's your questions to ask God. You can go to somebody, a psychic or somebody, and ask for help, or, look into your astrology and things like that. All those things help. Like, there's ways of doing it. But at some point, you have to build a relationship where you can get a direct answer from God. And the better you do that, the more sincere you are about it, the better it is. And so this is where this channel's for. There's lots of dumb fucks who aren't capable of that, or at least they don't think they're capable, or they're not willing. I don't know. It's there. I mean, everyone can do it, but it takes, some development, and it takes some ability, and it takes some, initiation. It takes a lot of things that people don't have or don't want to have. So, all right, this kind of got off track here, so let's go back. I was responding to, I think, the Erika Charlie Kirk thing here with the voiceover from before. Let's go to that. Succession, which is a great show, which had a good ending but a horrible ending. Just depressing. Very similar to if you saw the Netflix show Ozark, where the ending is evil wins, right? Like fucking, I mean, whatever it is, it's just evil is always there's no happy endings. When there's a succession, which is a big deal, if they're trying to call this a spiritual religious organization, it's also a political organization, succession is important. So you have, a very popular personality in Trump that's fading. Like, he's trending in the wrong direction. He's lost most of his supporter. His MAGA movement is a joke. And then he's going to have a successor, but the successor is inheriting something broken, and his successor is not going to have the personality and the appeal that Trump has, right? So succession's a big thing. Like, with Jesus, it was St. Peter that was supposed to be a successor, but clearly he didn't deliver. You wouldn't call him a Jesus. Now, in the Sajmark system of meditation, there's been 4 successions. And the first succession, the guy who started the organization, Lology, he had 200 followers, and he, no money, no donations, no organization. People used to come to his house, and he'd impart spiritual training. So he had 200 total followers, and then he died, and there was nothing. And he was preparing the second guy, Babaji. Both of them had the same name, Ramchandra. They both worked as baboos or clerks in a court system, in terms of their upbringing and education. But, not high-paying jobs in northern India. And he intercommuned with his successor, Babaji, and for 13 years prepared him to be his successor. And there was almost nobody left when this one preceptor, who was also, in communication, via channeling with Lology, announced his succession. And of the few people who were left, many of them had developed spiritual powers, cities. They tried to kill Babaji, will him to death. They tried to do spiritual warfare. And there was no property, and there was nothing, right? All he had was whatever he got spiritually from Lology. There was no organization. There was nothing. Like Lology, there was nothing. There was no formal organization. So Babaji became the new master, and he created a something that 10 to 15, 20, 5 to 10,000 people when he died. So that was back in 1945. So all the way back then. He dies in 1983. And he travels to countries all around the world. He had some hundreds of followers here in America. What he called associate. He didn't call people followers. What he called associates. He had some people in Europe, France, England, Denmark, a lot of people. 100 people in Denmark, but a small country. Some people in Australia, and then throughout various places in Asia. And he traveled, at least he had people go to Africa, some of these others, all the continents. And so, globally, he had maybe 5 to 10,000 people, maybe 2,000, people who were devoted. And then Charji took over. But Babaji didn't make it clear that Charji was going to be a successor. And they had one ashram by Babaji's house. Babaji's kids were total pieces of shit. One of them committed suicide. Another died, maybe by suicide. I'm not sure about the second one. And then he had one son who used to beat his wife and kids. These people would come to Babaji's house, and they were like European, women from Denmark and America, liberal women. And this guy was beating his wife and kids. Babaji was giving these sittings and smoking his hookah, and these people were, his son was beating his kids. The other son went to work. He got a job, which getting a job in India is everything. Like people, to secure a position. Like the way they feel about jobs, because 1.4 billion people and limited amount of good jobs. And so you get a job, and Master Charji got Babaji's son a job at this company. He was a high-level executive. And the guy turned on Charji. So his kids turned on Babaji's successor, and Babaji wrote it on a small piece of paper. That was, and the enemies tried to get the piece of paper and said that Charji was a successor. He told a number of people. Some of those people, even though they were told by Babaji, went against it because they were getting a better deal from the other side. And Charji was poisoned. Somebody showed up with a gun to try to kill him. And, and he was traveling with Babaji, and Babaji gave him a 90-second sitting. We do these meditations where, the preceptor or the master sits across from you, and you meditate on your heart, and your heart is cleaned, and you receive this energy, this transmission, which is the whole basis for the system. And Babaji transmitted his own condition in 1974 to Charji. Charji slowly took over the whole organization, and Babaji slowly, passed away. For 9 years. He had bad health. And, it was a big fucking deal. It lasted 13 years before Charji got hold of the ashram, which he never went back to. He never went back to that, that area in Shah Jahanpur, northern India. By then, Charji had grown the mission to like 100,000, 200,000 people. Globally, there was ashrams, properties. And then, of course, this piece of shit Daji took over. He's a legitimate master, but he folded like a card house. And so succession is a big deal, right? Because, if you have a personality, it's okay to be Charlie Kirk's wife and just sit there and say stupid shit and be a cunt. But, they're there to see Charlie. And then Erika can have some fans because people love Charlie and they're selling themselves as a couple. But that's whatever that shit is, right? Like succession is, you now have to like the other person. And when Charji took over, Babaji was like Yoda. He was 5 foot, 2 inches tall. He spoke like Yoda, like in short sentences, often things you had to figure out what he was trying to say. And, very soft, uneducated, just like a very simple person. And Charji was like 6'4", like 6'3", and he had a powerful personality. He acted like a bouncer, so he's always, protecting Babaji from people wanting to see him. So a lot of people didn't like him. He had a bigger personality. And it was a hard sell for those people to accept Charji. 90% of the people didn't accept Charji as his successor. And Charji went through all kinds of hell, legal battles and, attempts on his life. And, because it's a hard sell to make, right? And, Babaji was at the peak of his spiritual, evolution, at his death, and Charlie was just starting off, and you couldn't compare the two. So that's like always happens. Like it's a problem. You have a movement, but the movement is based in a personality. And even if you can transmit that essence to the new person, that doesn't mean other people will be able to see it or feel it. And so, it's always an issue. And so Erika Kirk fucking performed horribly. It's totally unlikable. She's like such a cunt. And, just on every fucking level. And, the time to release the video was right off the bat. Because then it would be like, oh, everyone saw the video. But then when then all of a sudden people start questioning whether he really wanted her to be his successor. Then you roll the video fucking almost a year later. Whatever it is. It's 9 months later. And of course people are going to call bullshit on it because you should have rolled it out in the beginning. Like you should have left no doubt like this was what was supposed to happen. But Charlie should have said it publicly. It should have already been in the archives. Like if Charlie had said it while he was still alive and it was there, and it was on video, like, like he would have put it up there. That would confirm his wishes. And there'd be legal documents to support it. Like he should have, there should be legal documents. If that's all your proof, is him saying that at a fucking gathering, you know what I mean, at some fucking event, and why would he even fucking say that? Like, why would he say that to those people? Like, you should do the whole speech. Show the whole speech. Like, show the speech and, whatever. And I don't give a shit. I hope that she stays, like I want her to run the fucking thing into the ground. It sucks. Charlie sucked and she sucked. But if he had said this publicly, but even if it's said publicly, part of the debate for Charlie was they said Babaji changed his mind later on his deathbed. He wanted somebody else. And that was the whole thing. And, so like this is always going to be an issue. Succession is a tough thing when it's about an organization that's about influence and having fans in a public aspect. And, you can't just because you're married to somebody doesn't mean they can do the job you did. Oftentimes it's the opposite. Like oftentimes couples, complement each other with their strengths, and you can't, someone can't take over for your job, especially if your job is doing this. So, that whole thing is like silly. Like the way they've played this thing, it always just makes things worse. They're always just making things worse. Okay, so I started to read through the comments, and you already would have seen this because I'm going to put it in before I read this, before this voiceover. The comments were, somebody says, Paul Romano files lawsuit against the USC White House event. You can't make this up. Paul Romano is a plaintiff suing the Orange House to stop the USC debacle. There's already not famous, but somebody who's a professional singer. And so I'll go to this. Let me go switch over to back. You've already seen this. I'll go do that part. I'll do a clip and you'll see the clip and then it'll lead to this, where I discovered it in real time. I don't know. We'll go back to the future here. Okay, so I just finished the clip, which you've already seen. And, all these Paul Romanos trying to steal my fucking thunder. Or my, I can't even call it thunder at this point. I don't know. Steal my, what would be less than thunder? Okay, so then somebody wrote, you have to be a Knicks fan to go to the game, and then the person wrote before that, in my opinion, it's not a clear boo. If you watch the game, it was a clear fucking boo. They booed him. They went to the national anthem, then they showed Trump, and there was a delay, and then there was a fucking, boo. I mean, and you could tell it was a clear fucking boo, you piece of shit. How dare you boo King Nutsack is the next comment, the previous comment. I'm going from newest to oldest. But you do have to be a Knicks fan because they beat the shit out of anybody wearing a Spurs jersey on the streets. There's multiple videos about that shit. And the New York Knicks fans go everywhere because it costs them so much money. I mean, it costs I don't even know. I guess some of the tickets on the floor were going for hundreds of thousands of dollars. And then everything above that was, tens of thousands to the cheapest ticket was like $8,000 or something. I mean, nosebleed seats. And then the people outside couldn't be there because Trump, they have a big staging area where there's a celebration on the rooftop. Like they have people who are watching the game on a big TV screen, and they have fans outside. And the poor people are usually the more ardent fans. Like a lot of these rich celebrities that are there in the front rows, and they get free tickets because they're celebrities, and maybe they're legitimate fans, like the Lakers had that too. But it's the people that are like who don't have as good lives, and this is their thing. And you see like these other, like in Oklahoma City and in San Antonio, they put jerseys on your seat, and if you wore the jersey, it color coordinated, either all the same colored jerseys, or 2 or 3 different colored jerseys in different sections. And they stand up until the first basket's made. The fans are much like in small market places where the biggest celebrities in that area are the athletes. Those places, the fans are just better. I mean, it's just when they convert. The Golden State Warriors had the Oracle Arena in Oakland, and after they won the championship, Steph Curry became popular. They created Chase fucking Bank created an arena in San Francisco, and the fan base went from being, tough people from Oakland, more average people, to rich people from Silicon Valley, and the fan base wasn't as good, right? They're not as into it. They're not as, violent. They're not a mob, But anyways, there's that. But Trump was clearly being a selfish piece of shit. Like, that's all he ever does. Like, he imposed himself and inconvenienced hundreds of thousands of New Yorkers, and then they lost the game. And if they lose the game tonight, they're probably gonna lose a series. And Trump is like fucking. I mean, the Knicks didn't play well, and that's whatever it is, and who knows, how much it was rigged against them, all the kind of things. I mean, certainly there's a lot of, we'll see how this thing plays out. But it's a very physical series, and the Knicks may be wearing down because it's, the Spurs are younger, stronger, more athletic, and we'll see how it goes. But if they lose, it's another thing that you can totally say Trump's at least partially responsible for. So, somebody wrote this comment here. Chargie's father gave it away for stamps, 2 laughing emojis. I hope he's at least liberated. But that was too funny how you said it like that. Well, here's the 2 stories. So, there was a guy named Swami Vivek, K.C. Varadachari, Dr. K.C. Varadachari. And he was a, Brahmin. The Brahmin is, there's a lot of gurus. So Babaji and Lalaji, the first 2 masters, were from, and I forget their caste, it begins with a K. And they were people who would eat meat and live in northern India. There's a lot of Muslims there. They're in these rural villages, the rural villages. So there's these villages there's this part of India with northern India where there's a lot of invaders. And there was a lot of Muslims there, a lot of Sikhs, and they were bigger, stronger. They interacted with the English a lot more. Bombay and New Delhi, were cities that the English were more involved in the northern part of India. They drank tea there, where they drink coffee in the south. And some of the people eat meat and fish. And there's warriors there because they had to fight off the invaders. Where in southern India, it was, softer people, more intellectual. And there was the Brahmin caste, which is the top caste there. And Brahmins are often politicians and doctors and gurus and things. And so not a lot of these gurus and a lot of these spiritual masters came from northern India. And when Charji became the master, a lot more people started to meditate because they are Brahmin, right? And the Brahmins would come up north, and they were used to, it never got below 70 degrees in India, like in Chennai, where Charji's ashram was, He moved the headquarters down to Chennai. And it's by the ocean, so it doesn't get too hot there. Like in the summer in northern India, it can get up to 110, 120. In Hyderabad, it gets up to 110 in April, May, and then the rains come in. But very hot, like, debilitating heat. And there are people who live in a part of India where it's so hot. They came to the ashram, a group of them, and they were wearing winter coats. It was like 85 degrees out. they were wearing coats on, and one guy had earmuffs, some old guy. And I'm like, it's almost 90 degrees out. So, but they would go up to northern India to visit Babaji thinking it was the same. They never had traveled there. And it was freezing. And they had just, clothes from southern India, these guys. So there was this whole thing. And there was this guy, Dr. K.C. Vradachari, who was a well-known, he was well-versed in theology, mostly Indian religious history, but world religious history. And Sharji went to him as a preceptor. And so Babaji went to the guy's house. And he had given the guy a sample of the transmission. Now, the guy was prejudiced against Babaji because he was in the Brahmin caste. And Babaji was, was this caste that was kind of a lower caste and, wasn't known for spirituality. But Babaji goes to his house and he has this guy that traveled with him. And Babaji and this guy were smokers. And they'd had to go outside to smoke. Babaji smoked a hookah. And, Babaji spent days transmitting to this guy, K.C. Vradachari, and, all the stuff that's done in Sashmark. I think Babaji called K.C. Vradachari Dr. Sahib or something, professor. I think he called him the doctor, whatever it is. And so he goes out to the other guy smoking this guy that traveled with Babaji's kind of a big burly guy. And he was, almost kind of like a bodyguard, but not like, he was a spiritual follower. And Babaji goes, I've won the doctor's heart. We can now smoke inside. And so K.C. Vradachari became one of his chief disciples, Babaji's person. And he was, well-respected person, an academic person. And Sharji went to K.C. Vradachari, and Sharji was a very intellectual person. And K.C. Vradachari trained Sharji, who was a business person. He certainly had spiritual tendencies, but he was a businessman. In all this, all his religious knowledge, like he was his preceptor. And, K.C. Vradachari maybe thought he was going to be Babaji's successor or whatever. And then at some point, Babaji made Sharji his secretary. At one point, he said that he indicated that Sharji was a follower of Dr. K.C. Vradachari and not him. And Sharji kind of felt, upset, like he was, that he was now, he was more listening to the Dr. K.C. Vradachari than he was to Babaji. But Babaji made him secretary of the mission. And K.C. Vradachari lost his shit. Like he got all jealous, and he was in the central region. And Babaji had said he had put K.C. Vradachari farther ahead of himself than he was himself, and K.C. Vradachari lost his shit. And Sharji went over with his dad over to the guy's house, and K.C. Vradachari just told him what a piece of shit he was, in a refined professorial way, for like 2 hours. And he didn't say a word. And, he's younger, there's respect. And K.C. Vradachari goes, look at you. I'm so angry and I'm saying all these things to you. He's basically saying that he betrayed him. Yeah, I'm saying all these things to you. And you're sitting there cold. It's your business training. And Sharji said, no, it's my spiritual training. And that's like a famous interaction. And he left, and K.C. Vradachari was like a mess. And Babaji was trying to prop him up, but he fell like a stone. Like he lost all his, he was in the central region, he just fucking fell. And, because of his jealousy and just being a petty piece of shit. And he had a son who, he ended up starting his own thing. And he went back and forth, and there's a whole long story there where I'm not going to get into. But Sharji's father, Sharji talked about his dad, he loses his wife. His wife is, he's got 3 young boys and a daughter who ends up dying, because she dies like a year or 2 after the mom. The mom, they had these ritualistic baths that they had to wash themselves in the morning with cold water. Most places didn't have hot water. And she gave birth and then is doing some kind of bath when she should be laying in bed. And she got a chill, her mom, his Sharji's mom. And she, was sick for like a year and then dies. And she was really spiritual, and her family, she was the Lakshmi, the gem, the spiritual wealth of her her parents' home and her family, and they fell in hard times. Like they're kind of a affluent Brahmin family, and they fall apart. You know, his in-laws, Chargie's dad's in-laws, and so Chargie's dad's like, and all these people start dying. Chargie ends up having to fucking light the pyre, you know, all these things, you know, when they have the funeral. And Chargie's dad decides not to remarry, even though he's a young man, because he thinks that the new wife will be jealous towards his sons. So he raises these kids, and he has this accident where, you know, he's looking through a telescope and somebody didn't put the lenses in right, and his eye just burns out, like fucking. So he's got one eye, he's got a glass eye, and he's like fucking, you know, no wife, and he, you know, somehow manages to raise his kids, and then he follows Chargie into doing the meditation, and Babaji loves him, and Babaji moves him quickly through all the spiritual points, and he's like doing well, he's a preceptor, and then he just loses it, gets into stamps, and he kind of loses interest in it, and Babaji was trying to prop him up, but his attention to this mundane material thing pulled him. He didn't do anything bad, you know, like it wasn't like he was being punished. It's just that he wasn't focused on his spirituality. He wasn't focused on God. And when you get to those levels, you have to think about nothing but God, really. Because, you know, everything, you have such a powerful vacuum in terms of your spiritual energy, and you know, like anything that you attend to will like become like empowered. You know, like your abilities, where you are spiritually, you're just so much more powerful. So when you make a mistake, it's magnified many times over. You know, Babaji has said to Charji, you know, if you allow hatred into your heart with your spiritual condition, it'll contaminate your whole system. You have to discipline yourself to not allow negativity to invade your, you know, Charji had every reason to hate lots of people, you know, like as does every spiritual person. And if you start getting despair, you start getting bummed out, you start getting, you know, whatever, which is so easy to do. It contaminates your, you know, your condition, your spiritual condition. You know, the difference between spiritual approach and spiritual condition. And the spiritual approach gives you, you know, more power. So, you know, more, like it's whatever you think happens. You know, where most people have an idea and it takes a lot of energy to make that idea into reality. When you reach these higher levels, you just have a thought and it immediately happens. So you have to discipline the shit out of your thought force, because, you know, you can't be cursing people or getting mad at people, because bad things will start happening to them. You know, because, you know, just because you've lost, you know, you have these bad thoughts like people have. Like somebody wrongs you and you wish bad things on them. And if you do that as a spiritual person, those bad things will happen. But you've misused your power, so you suffer too. You suffer even more. So his dad just fucking plummeted because of fucking stamps. And it's unclear. And so these were two guys who reached the central region, which is very rare. I mean, even Saj Marg, it's only a handful of people. And, you know, it's, and almost all of those people fell. I mean, they some of them, they were able to, you know, redeem themselves. But it's human nature to get focused on lower things. It's an unfortunate part of, you know, human condition, that, you know, the power and the allure of the lower nature is so strong that even people who are spiritually gifted and rise up to high spiritual levels get pulled down to mundane levels. You know, it's just another reason why we're fucked. You know, so. All right, so there's no comments to deal with, or whatever. So I'm going to wrap this one up here. Only spirituality will save this world. It's Paul Romano, definitely pointing for the apocalypse and the ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.